Manchester United are awful, and for the last decade, countless players have been labeled the problem to then get shifted out of the club just for the media to find a new player to blame, and this has happened time and time again. But what exactly happened to these problem players after being sold? Were they really the problem, or did they thrive after being sold? Well, I'll tell you, from now what happened to some of these players after leaving will truly shock you. And starting with Phil Jones, who's better remembered for his meme-worthy facial reactions and awkward diving headers. Jones was signed by Sir Alex from Blackburn Rovers back in 2011, and if Fergie thinks you're a promising defender, you probably have a big future at the highest level. Just a few weeks into Jones's time at United, he provided 2 assists against rivals Man City from defense, and it looked like Man United's impressive track record of signing young British talents was set to continue. Yet, Jones rarely looked like a player of United standards. He made 29 appearances during Ferguson's final Premier League title-winning season, but the defender was better known for his unorthodox defending than his ability to dominate the league's best strikers. The defender scored own goals against Valencia, Chelsea, and even Tottenham, pulling some pretty funny faces along the way. Throughout Jones's time at Old Trafford, which incredibly lasted over 11 years, there was constant speculation the club were trying to move on their once wonderkid defender. But to Jones's credit, he stayed at the Manchester club during some of their darkest years and always tried his best despite struggling to stay fit throughout. And another player who arrived at United when they were world-conquering titans and departed when they were in shambles is Ashley Young, who joined Man United in the same summer as Jones for a fee of £17 million. But as Ferguson's time at United came to an end, the future became uncertain for the winger. The former Aston Villa starlet just scored another 9 goals in his next 102 Premier League appearances for United, and Young's shyness in front of goal eventually led him to being moved to full-back. But as the years went by, United fans grew more and more frustrated with Young being played in defense, and as he was eventually named captain, the poor performances persisted until fans reached boiling point, eventually resulting in a move to Inter Milan. Young won a Serie A with Inter before returning to the Premier League with Everton, where he performed adequately in a struggling team. On the whole, the fullback's career has been solid with his mixed reputation among United fans, which is probably due to just being shy of the level required to win Premier League trophies rather than a disastrous lack of talent or work ethic. But on the flip side, one former United superstar who arguably had the talent but lacked the work ethic is the club's 2010s academy prodigy, Jesse Lingard. Lingard was the standout youngster in Man United's 10-11 FA Youth Cup triumph, and supporters eagerly waited for the rising midfielder to break into Ferguson's serial title-winning team. But Lingard's career trajectory was a little slower than anticipated, as he needed loan moves at several championship clubs before United trusted him as a regular in their first team. The Englishman made 50 Premier League appearances across the 15-16 and 16-17 seasons, but rarely found the back of the net. However, during the 17-18 season, Lingard exploded into one of the Premier League's most exciting youngsters, his dazzling feat helping him to provide 14 goal contributions in just 33 appearances. But with Lingard's recognition as one of the country's most talented footballers came a wave of attention the midfielder wasn't ready to receive. In 2018, Lingard launched a clothing brand, J Lings, resulting in pundits Roy Keane and Gary Neville questioning his commitment to turning his club's fortunes around. Supporters, ex-players, and pundits started to turn on their homegrown star, and the midfielder's active and audacious social media persona, dance moves, and rumored ill professionalism were cited as reasons why United's team culture was failing. Eventually, during the 2021 season, the midfielder was loaned out to West Ham United, where he thrived, providing 13 goal contributions in 16 appearances. United's academy star then returned to Manchester at the end of the season with the expectation that he was finally ready to kick on. However, Lingard only appeared 16 times for Man United the following campaign and scored just 2 goals in the process. At the end of the season, the midfielder was released with just about everyone fed up with his attitude, where Lingard had a poor 1-year spell at Nottingham Forest before moving to the Korean League, where he still plays today. Now, over the last 10 years, Lingard is one example of many United players who started brightly before falling under the pressure of the bright lights, because during David De Gea's early years at United, he looked like he'd go on to achieve legend status. The imposing Spanish goalkeeper won the Premier League with the English Giants in 12-13 and continued to act heroically despite United's dramatic fall from grace over the following seasons. United's 6'4" goalkeeper prevented their struggles from being significantly worse, so much so that De Gea made the Premier League's team of the season during 5 back-to-back campaigns between 2012 and 2017. So, why does a player who saved United's blushes on so many occasions have such a complicated relationship with the club's supporters? The goalkeeper, who made over 500 appearances and won the FA Cup, League Cup, and the Europa League alongside his earlier Premier League title, should have left a hero, but he stayed long enough to become a villain. De Gea had a shocking 2018 World Cup as Spain crashed out of the tournament early, and most supporters thought it was just a blip in his career. But the poor form continued into Man United's league matches the following season. The keeper wasn't just the same. He stopped producing heroics and started allowing savable shots to trickle past him on a regular basis. De Gea made mistakes in games against Barcelona, Everton, Man City, and Chelsea, and fans began to wonder what caused such a dramatic loss of form. Concerns over his mental and physical health were persistent as his poor form continued over the next couple of seasons before De Gea was eventually let go on a free transfer in 2023. By this point, few elite clubs were taking the Spaniard seriously. He eventually signed for Fiorentina and made 23 appearances during the 23-24 season and does look to be playing back at a strong level, but nothing like his prime years at Old Trafford. But now someone imagine signing a World Cup winner, midfield general, and a serial winner. That's a sure bet, right? Well, not really, because next is Bastian Schweinsteiger. This German midfielder was a cheat code during Bayern Munich's Champions League and Bundesliga triumphs, so when he arrived in Manchester in 2015, there were expectations that Schweinsteiger could help the Red Devils lift the Premier League title again. But the World Cup winner never adapted to the intensity of the Premier League. Arriving at 30, Schweinsteiger was still at a reasonable age to compete at the top level, but Bayern moved him on for a reason. Having totted up over 500 league games during the German club's yearly title challenges, Schweinsteiger's legs had gone. And if there's one league where midfielders need to be in elite physical condition, it's the Premier League. But Schweinsteiger didn't always shy away from physical confrontation because in December 2015, the midfielder received a retrospective 3-match ban for striking West Ham's Winston Reid. The former Bayern Munich sensation's time on the sidelines continued. He sustained several injuries that limited him to just 18 Premier League appearances for United. But even when the midfielder was fully fit, Mourinho, who'd replaced Van Gaal, wasn't convinced by his ability or physical condition until it got to the point where he was left out of the team, and despite being on a substantial wage, he was demoted to the club's U23, a decision that caused controversy among several senior players. Schweinsteiger did return to make a handful of cup appearances after Mourinho gave in to the pressure of his players, but this transfer nightmare had everyone relieved when he left to play the tail end of his career for Chicago Fire in 2017. But now we're getting to the 10 players who were labeled the biggest problems at Manchester United, and we have some heavy hitters on this list. But for now, at number 10, we have Henrik Mkhitaryan, whose relationship with Jose Mourinho destroyed his career in England. The Armenian playmaker was expected to achieve great things at Old Trafford, as he was coming off winning the Bundesliga's Players Player of the Season award the season prior during a scintillating campaign for Borussia Dortmund. But on Mkhitaryan's debut against Man City, he was subbed off at halftime, and the start of his time at United continued in a similar vein, taking the attacking midfielder 6 months to score his first Premier League goal, and supporters were beginning to question the £27 million transfer. Mkhitaryan's first Premier League season ended with the Armenian registering just 1 assist, 14 fewer than he'd managed the previous season in the Bundesliga. Still, the season ended in glory as the former Dortmund man notched the winner in United's 2017 Europa League final win over Ajax, meaning surely Mkhitaryan would now kick on. And he started the following season electrically with 5 assists in the opening 3 Premier League matches, so it appeared United were finally seeing the best of their £27 million man. But shortly after, the attacking midfielder's form nosedived and was eventually excluded from the squad altogether. The board were frustrated with paying his high wages with little end product. Mourinho had lost faith in him, and sections of the United fan base were beginning to turn on the man they'd been so excited to sign just 18 months earlier. So, Mkhitaryan was transferred to Arsenal in a swap deal for Alexis Sanchez, a player who we're also going to get to soon. Henrik performed okay at the Emirates Stadium, but he was eventually moved on to Roma in 2020, where he enjoyed an outstanding 2021 campaign with 24 goal involvements in the Serie A. Today, now aged 36, Mkhitaryan features regularly for Inter Milan, meaning the question remains whether the Premier League was too tough for him or Old Trafford simply ruined the guy. But if Mkhitaryan's time in the Premier League was debatable, Marcos Rojo's was simply a disaster that bounced from one controversy to another. Rojo arrived at Old Trafford in the summer of 2014, but the defender's problems in Manchester started almost immediately as he missed the first 3 matches of the 15-16 season due to difficulties gaining a work permit because of criminal charges pending in Argentina. But this is something Man United supporters would have forgiven quickly if he started delivering on the pitch, but that's not quite what happened. During his first campaign at the club, Rojo missed over half of the club's fixtures due to injuries, and by the following preseason was causing unnecessary problems for himself once again. The defender was unable to join up with United's preseason tour of America due to an undisclosed passport problem, and this infuriated Van Gaal, who had been eager to put Rojo through his paces. Weeks later, Rojo was in trouble again as the Argentine international failed to report the extent of a hamstring injury sustained during a Premier League match against Southampton, resulting in the defender training on it and picking up a knock that sidelined him for several weeks. And Rojo's time at United never really got going, as the defender rarely went more than a few matches without picking up an injury or being involved in a disciplinary matter. And by 2020, Rojo was loaned out to Estudiantes before being sold to Boca Juniors the following summer. But another player whose United career was defined by injuries was Anthony Martial, the Golden Boy winner dubbed to become the next Thierry Henry during his teenage years, to the point that they even put a Ballon d'Or clause in his contract when signing him. And Martial took Manchester by storm after a £50 million move and an unforgettable debut goal against Liverpool. United's new signing continued to shine during his early days in Manchester as he produced 18 goal involvements across his debut Premier League campaign. But despite Europa League and League Cup triumphs, the following season was less prolific for the Frenchman, who scored just 4 Premier League goals under the new manager Jose Mourinho. Speculation that a fallout with Mourinho would see rumors that Martial would be leaving the club, but he responded to the rumors by tweeting, "The papers are wrong, don't listen to them." But even if Martial wasn't leaving the club, injuries and inconsistent form were preventing the Frenchman from enjoying a prolonged period in United's attack. For a player many hoped would dominate the Premier League for years to come, Martial's performances were underwhelming. Still, the Golden Boy winner scored 38 goals across the following 3 Premier League seasons, and there was hope Martial could evolve into an elite attacker. But throughout the remainder of his time at Old Trafford, the same story of injuries and poor form repeated itself until he was finally deemed to be deadwood and cleared from the club's wage bill, being loaned out to Sevilla and then released in 2024, where he now plays out in the Greek League, meaning he hardly shined after leaving the club. But from one disappointing signing to another, Memphis Depay arrived in Old Trafford and became one of the most troublesome players in the squad because of attitude issues and the desire to be more of a celebrity than a footballer. This love for stardom might have been one of the reasons that attracted the Dutchman to Manchester in the first place, with Chelsea and Barcelona reportedly interested. But Depay opted for United, knowing the Premier League giants were generous in the wages they offered to young players. So, after a prolific 14-15 campaign with PSV Eindhoven, Depay made the £25 million move to Old Trafford, and the excitement around Depay's arrival was so palpable, the forward was given the club's famous number 7 jersey, previously worn by Cristiano Ronaldo, David Beckham, and Eric Cantona. But while United's iconic number 7s of yesteryear displayed unwavering dedication to helping United win trophies, Depay was more interested in partying and building status. United's assistant manager Ryan Giggs noticed Depay was frequently pictured drunkenly stumbling out of Manchester nightclubs and warned the attacker to tone down his off-field antics because his performances on the pitch were subpar. But the Dutch international did not listen. And by 2016, the Man United flop was planning to launch his side hustle, rap. So, with the club's management aware Depay wasn't focused enough to represent United, they were quick to move him on, and in January 2017, Depay joined Lyon for £16 million, having only scored 2 goals in 33 appearances for the Red Devils. But upon joining the French side, his form picked right back up as he went on to score 76 goals and register 54 assists in under 200 games for the club, before then moving on to Barcelona, Atletico Madrid, and even Corinthians, not to mention scoring 47 goals at international level, meaning it might just have been the number 7 shirt that was too big for Memphis. But from one of United's worst ever number 7s to arguably the best, Cristiano Ronaldo shocked the world when he sensationally returned to Old Trafford in the summer of 2021. But the 5-time Ballon d'Or winner's second spell in Manchester ended in him being labeled the problem by the manager and being forced out of Old Trafford after a complete and total disaster of an interview. Still, things got off to a dream start for Ronaldo and his adoring supporters. During the Portuguese superstar's second debut, Ronaldo scored twice in front of a mesmerized Old Trafford crowd who bellowed the legend's "See" celebration so loudly it was as if a volcano had erupted in Manchester. The honeymoon period continued for Ronaldo, who single-handedly saved United from an embarrassing Champions League group stage exit with 6 crucial goals in fixtures against Atalanta and Villarreal. And the striker's form in the Premier League was equally impressive as he found the net 18 times in 30 appearances, but amazingly, it wasn't without scrutiny, because before the arrival of Ronaldo, pundits tipped United to challenge for the title. For the first time in years, they had an attacking quartet consisting of Bruno Fernandes, Marcus Rashford, Mason Greenwood, and Edinson Cavani, who were lethal in front of goal. The team relied on pace and off-ball pressing, something Ronaldo, despite his unrelenting goal-scoring abilities, couldn't replicate. United finished the 21-22 season in 6th position, 4 places lower than they had achieved the previous season without CR7. But at this point, criticisms of Ronaldo were in their early stages. It would take off to a whole other level the following season. As arguably football's greatest ever goal scorer, Ronaldo was desperate to play every minute of every game, something his new manager, Erik ten Hag, was unconvinced of his ability to do. So, Cristiano was left out of a key Premier League fixture against Tottenham and refused to stay at Old Trafford to watch the game. And Ronaldo had another tantrum after being subbed off against Chelsea a couple of weeks later. With a frosty relationship with Ten Hag, Ronaldo's days at Old Trafford were evidently numbered until the 22nd of December, when the footballing icon detailed his disappointment at the club's setup in a fiery interview with Piers Morgan, and was released by the club shortly after, as Ronaldo felt disrespected and Ten Hag felt Ronaldo was the problem at the club. But now we're moving into arguably the 5 biggest media-labeled problems the club has had in the last decade, and at number 5, Romelu Lukaku had an underwhelming time at Old Trafford, to say the least. Now, this one's tricky because when a player scores 28 times in 66 appearances and isn't remembered as a success, something seems off. The Belgium striker scored 25 times in 37 Premier League appearances for Everton during the 16-17 season, so when United secured his services for £75 million the following summer, it was a pretty big deal. But despite Lukaku's deadly nature in front of goal, there were already several criticisms of his wider play. His first touch wasn't good enough, he was considered lazy out of possession, and when he wasn't putting the ball in the back of the net, he contributed very little. And these remarks were further exacerbated by the added pressure of playing in front of 75,000 expectant supporters at Old Trafford who demanded more from the striker than just goals. Lukaku would go through periods of good form, but they'd be followed by lengthy periods without finding the net, where the Belgian would offer little for his team. The striker's comments to the media wouldn't help his cause either, because in 2018, during a period of bad form, a journalist asked the striker if he'd ever consider a move to Italy, and Lukaku responded, "Why not? I hope it happens." United supporters, sick of watching an inept and now seemingly uninterested striker miss countless chances on almost a weekly basis, were furious. The striker eventually got his move to Italy, but it wasn't without controversy, because in 2019, a week before signing for Inter Milan, Lukaku frustrated his manager and teammates by leaking training data in an effort to silence criticism of his speed. He posted a short video revealing the maximum speeds of all United players after a training drill with the caption "lack of pace," accompanied by a laughing emoji. But Lukaku wasn't the only player to ditch United for Inter that summer, as his teammate Alexis Sanchez followed suit after what is now seen as one of the worst signings of the 21st century, as he was swapped for Mkhitaryan in January 2018, becoming one of the league's best-paid players overnight. Now, by all means, Sanchez is a football great. The winger was a joy to watch during his earlier seasons at Arsenal, but subtle signs of the once electric star's physical decline were becoming more apparent week by week before arriving at the Theatre of Dreams. Still, his earlier career form was enough to get United fans excited, but it wouldn't be long before they received a heavy dose of reality. With a 4.5-year contract secured and weekly wages only the world's best are deserving of, Sanchez completely took his foot off the gas. The 2015 PFA Player of the Season only found the back of the net on 3 occasions during his 32 league appearances for United. There was talk among media pundits and United supporters that Sanchez, who had already shined for Barcelona and Arsenal, was no longer interested in performing at the top level. So he was shipped off to Inter with Lukaku, but formed a part of the Serie A winning side of 2021, meaning maybe it's just the Italian league that allows these United problems to thrive. But another player who arrived at Old Trafford as a footballing icon and left with critics questioning his ability was the brilliant Argentine winger Angel Di Maria. It was mind-boggling that United managed to get their hands on Di Maria in the first place. His man-of-the-match performance for Real Madrid in the 13-14 Champions League final was iconic, and suggestions that he could leave the Bernabeu sounded outrageous. But when he arrived at Old Trafford for a British record transfer fee, the Argentine would have just been relieved to avoid that disaster of being offered to Spurs. But little did he know, disaster was still to unfold. Just hours after United announced the signing of Di Maria, the club were humiliatingly beaten 4-0 by League One minnows MK Dons, and if that wasn't enough for the World Cup winner to start reminiscing about his time in Spain, the rest of the season would be. United were the laughingstock of England as they struggled to adapt to life after Ferguson, and the season finished with Di Maria scoring just 3 Premier League goals and then begging for a move out of England. He claims he never wanted to join United in the first place, and that from the moment he arrived he was unhappy. He went on to sign for PSG, where he regained his top-level form and continued to build his legacy in both the French League and the international stage, playing an integral role in 2 Copa America wins and a World Cup win, proving in this case, Man United might have been the problem rather than the player. And if you needed another case of that, we have Manchester's biggest clown, who became one of Spain's best players overnight. Anthony arrived at Old Trafford for a mouth-watering £92 million price tag in 2022, but from the off, the price felt high. At the time, spending so much on an unproven winger seemed unjustifiable, and a few months into his time at the club, it was entirely incomprehensible. The winger scored just 5 Premier League goals for United and spent most of his time failing to complete pointless skill moves in front of an Old Trafford crowd desperate for their team to be taken seriously again. The Brazilian's disinterested body language was frequently criticized by supporters, and Antony even went a year without providing a goal contribution at Old Trafford. And off-field allegations didn't help supporters sympathize with their failing winger, because in September 2023, Antony was accused of committing domestic abuse against an ex-partner, but the case was eventually closed due to insufficient evidence a year later. Now, Antony has been loaned out to Betis, where by some miracle, he's become one of the best players in Spain, scoring and assisting for fun, even being nominated for the Player of the Month award in his very first month, as this problem seems happy as ever to get out of Manchester and begs the question, maybe Man United are the problem. But with the case of Marcus Rashford, we can see the same questions being asked, because he was frozen out of the club for an alleged lack of commitment for him to show up and perform at Aston Villa. The Rashford story started when the forward was just a dreaming 18-year-old and made his debut as an unknown last-minute addition to the club's Europa League lineup versus Midtjylland in 2016. And with the fixture finally balanced, Rashford, like a prodigy, scored twice to send United to the next round, and things just went up from there. The boy was set to be the superstar that would rewrite United's illustrious history books and replace Wayne Rooney as the club's all-time top scorer. Yet, if we fast forward 9 years, Rashford is on loan at Aston Villa. So, where did it all go wrong for the Premier League conquering wonder kid? The English striker's talent is undeniable, but his career has enjoyed more hot and cold patches than a broken thermostat. Despite his ability, Rashford has scored more than 11 Premier League goals on just 2 occasions, and many speculate the inconsistent form has to do with his attitude. In February 2024, after a period of poor on-field performances for Rashford, pundit Roy Keane labeled the 2015 wonder kid's off-field lifestyle as that of an idiot after it emerged the striker faced disciplinary action following a boozy night out. A few weeks later, fellow pundit Jamie O'Hara described Rashford's on-field work rate as embarrassingly bad, while former United star Paul Scholes claimed the once electric forward should be banished from the dressing room due to his negative influences on the squad. It's unclear what went on with Rashford after the 22-23 season, when the Mancunian scored 17 goals in 35 Premier League appearances, but the forward's demeanor changed. Videos of him uninterestedly strolling around the pitch surfaced online, and his form fell off a cliff, and Ruben Amorim was left with no choice but to ship him out of the club. But despite this, he reacted professionally, something which cannot be said about the biggest transfer nightmare Manchester United have had in the last decade, Jadon Sancho. Before arriving, the English winger's dancing feet, electric pace, and goal-scoring ability made him arguably the world's most wanted teenager during his time at Borussia Dortmund. United tracked the winger for years, so when the Englishman finally signed for the club for £73 million in 2021, expectations were through the roof. But Sancho didn't get off to a flying start. It took the winger until late November to register his first goal in red and white, and things wouldn't get much better for the Londoner as he finished his opening campaign with just 6 Premier League goal contributions. Solskjaer publicly called for Sancho to step up, but his form remained the same, and later that season, the former wonder kid was granted a short leave from Man United training for mental health-related difficulties. Upon returning, the Englishman appeared sporadically in United's team, who were performing woefully under Ralf Rangnick. During the following preseason with Erik ten Hag now in charge, it appeared Sancho hadn't resolved his personal problems. The winger returned to preseason sluggish, out of shape, and seemingly uninterested, and Sancho's form failed to recover. He was left out of England's 22 World Cup squad, and concerns regarding his health refused to go away. Ten Hag told the press his poor health was a combination of physical but also mental health issues, and the Dutchman initially appeared willing to help his troubled young talent, but that eagerness evaporated the following autumn. The manager left Sancho out of a Premier League game against Arsenal because of his performance in training, stating, "You have to reach a level every day at Manchester United." And Sancho's response? An impulsive social media post stating, "I will not allow people saying things that is completely untrue. I've conducted myself very well in training this week. I believe there are other reasons for this matter that I won't go into. I've been a scapegoat for a long time, which isn't fair." Ten Hag demanded a public apology, but Sancho refused, and he was eventually loaned back to Dortmund, where he helped the German side reach the Champions League final. Today, the winger is on loan at Chelsea, where he displays moments of quality, but criticisms relating to his attitude refuse to go away, meaning that, in this case, Jadon Sancho might really have been the problem. Now, click the video on screen now. It's one of my best yet.